Welcome to the Dowden Podcast. I'm your host, the official CRG, and today we are going to talk about the top 3 most haunted places in California. Now, before we get started, viewer discretion is advised, as some topics in this episode won't be suitable for younger audiences. But if you want to see video and pictures of this episode, you can find it on our YouTube channel with the audio everywhere else. Now, to start this off, the first location we're going to talk about today is the Padre Hotel in Bakersfield, California. Now, the Padre Hotel opened in 1928, becoming a hotspot for nightlife, offering music, dancing, entertainment, and drinks, making it an anchor for business for downtown Bakersfield. And while due to the Depression, most businesses shut down, but since Bakersfield was an oil town, they had enough money to keep it running, even having them run through World War II, bringing them more business and money. However, in the 1950s, tragedy started to unfold, having a deadly fire on the 7th floor that killed a family, including the children. But it didn't stop there, as in 1952, an earthquake caused damage to the hotel, ultimately trapping guests in the basement, killing them. But in 1954, the hotel was purchased and renovated, ultimately closing the 3rd through 7th floor off to the guests. But through the 60s, the hotel started to decline, losing customers and funding. So they decided to choose to take long-term renters through the 70s and 90s who didn't mind living in a compromised building. But during that time, there was said to be multiple people who jumped off the Padre Hotel, taking their own lives for unknown reasons that still can't be explained today. But throughout the years, lawsuits were filed and owners were constantly changing. But in 2008, the hotel was sold and went under a crazy $18 million renovation in partnership with the city, ultimately opening in 2010. The hotel still stands today, having guests from all around hear strange noises and even smells, and sometimes even seeing small childlike figures. Now, if you thought that was a lot, then you're really in for an episode, as the next location we're going to talk about is the Preston Castle, also known as the Preston School of Industry and Preston Youth Correctional Facility in Ione, California. Now, the Preston Castle was built during the 1890s and is nearly 50,000 square feet and surrounded today by 13 acres of stately supported buildings. The Preston Castle includes a basement, a 3-story annex, and even 4 floors between the two that would house patients and staff. The Preston Castle was known as the best reform school to the outside world, but inside its walls was a hard, brutal life. New patients were forced to swim in a small indoor pool of lye. And for people who don't know, lye is an alkali metal hydroxide, which has been used for thousands of years to make products like soap, food, and paper, and can cause severe corrosive burns to your throat, esophagus, and stomach with permanent damage if swallowed. But to think it wouldn't get worse, horrific stories of abuse and neglect poured out to the public for years, but people would refuse to listen. Full-blown wards would die of severe illness like tuberculosis, and other wards were even killed by the guards. There's even a ground cemetery that has 23 graves of individuals who were sent to the castle to be rehabilitated. Ultimately, the state of California closed the Preston Castle in 1960, having it deteriorate over the years. But in 2014, the property was deeded to the Preston Castle Foundation, now having volunteers to go in and plan private and public events in efforts to preserve and save the Preston Castle. But till this day, visitors can sense the depressing, disturbing atmosphere and the past horror within the Preston Castle walls. Visitors also experience cold spots, intense fear, and some even hear strange noises. Now, like always, the third location in this episode, I believe, is the most known and most haunted place on this list, and that is the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, California. Now, the Cecil Hotel was just steps away from Skid Row, but was opened in 1924, having the original idea be this massive art style building, bringing in business travelers from all over. But due to the Great Depression, business became slow, having the hotel start to lose its purpose, but that didn't stop the owners. The hotel remained open throughout the years, but what eventually take place was something straight out of a movie, as the first death ever recorded took place a little more than 2 years after its opening due to a suicide. But it didn't stop there. Many more suicides took place throughout the years, having guests jump from the roof and windows without thinking. Also, in the late 1960s, a guest living in one of the residential rooms was found dead with stab wounds and bruises, but her murder was never solved. But during the Cecil Hotel's operation, there was also known to be two serial killers who actually lived in the Cecil Hotel before their captures. And that was serial killer Richard Ramirez and Jack Underweger. Richard Ramirez was known as a frequent Skid Row person, but was a resident at the Cecil Hotel before his capture in 1985. It is believed that Richard Ramirez committed some of his crimes while staying at the Cecil. Ramirez had more than a dozen victims and was sentenced to 19 death sentences, though he died of cancer while incarcerated in 2013. But for as of Jack Underweger, Jack was arrested in 1991 while also staying at the Cecil Hotel. Jack was a magazine writer who was supposed to be on an assignment in the red light district, but instead, he murdered 3 sex workers by strangling them. Ultimately, upon his arrest, he was found hung by police, which would then end a reign of terror, as we thought, because in 2013, there was a mysterious disappearance of Alyssa Lamb. Alyssa Lamb was a Canadian college student who was spotted behaving erratically on an elevator surveillance video before vanishing. Her naked body was later found in a closed water tank on the hotel's roof. But as for the hotel, the Cecil Hotel was designated as a historical culture monument by the city of Los Angeles in 2017, as it was closed the same year for renovations. Until this day, the future of the troubled property is still unclear. So with that said, if you guys like this type of content and want me to keep it going, make sure to like and follow. But today's quote is by the great Albert Einstein. He once said, "Look deep into nature and then you will understand everything better." I appreciate you tuning in. You can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And this is the Dowden Podcast.